Hi, my name is Bob Dittmer, and welcome to Explorations in Public Relations. This series of short videos help us understand and illuminate the practice of the profession of public relations. Our guest today is Rob Norris from Cummins, Inc., an international manufacturer of diesel engines, if I'm right.
Diesel engines, their components, and also generating sets.
And there's your elevator pitch. We're going to be talking today. Rob is the corporate communications manager for the corporation and is intimately involved in a thing called Six Sigma. Now, if you don't know what Six Sigma is, well, we're going to explain that to you a little bit today. And so we're going to break our first session into two parts. The first part, we're going to talk about Six Sigma, what it is and what it hopes to accomplish in organizations. And then we'll come back with a second segment and we'll talk about how you can take the Six Sigma principles and apply them to public relations processes. Rob, let's start with Six Sigma. Let's begin by just asking the pregnant question, Six Sigma what?
Right. What is Sigma and why do you want six of them? All right. Sigma, of course, it's a Greek letter, but in statistics, it stands for standard deviation from the norm. All right. The norm is like the mean, the average. If you got an array of numbers, and it can be temperature, it can be, the thickness of paint on a surface, or it can be the number of complaints you get, or whatever it is. It's a number. Now, we all know how to average numbers. You add them up and you divide by the total number of numbers you've got and you get your average. Now, the sigma, the deviation from that, is sort of like the average distance between your numbers. So the more they're spread out they are, the larger the sigma is. All right, and the more of them you got. So a sigma it's a variable kind of a measure. And the idea of Six Sigma is that you want to be able to fit six of these standard deviations. You want to narrow them down so six of them will fit between the norm and your upper limit and your lower limit. For example, if you wanted temperate weather all year long, you'd probably want to live in San Diego, wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. Rarely gets below 55, rarely gets above 85, right. All right? So the temperature sigmas are pretty narrow there, all right? And that's not to say it never gets below or above, but most of the time it doesn't. Mm-hmm. Now, Indianapolis, on the other hand, big difference. It gets below 0, it gets above 100 in the summertime. The sigmas there would be larger. So if I only want to live between 55 and 85 degrees, this isn't the place for me, right? Because it's out of, I can only probably fit two sigmas between the standard, that is the norm, the average temperature, and my limit. All right? This can be applied to anything. It can be applied to anything that you can measure, and that is what signifies Six Sigma. You try to narrow those sigmas down so that you can fit them so that the curve is really narrow. I mean, look at it this way. If it were 70 degrees every hour of the day and night, all the time, there wouldn't be a curve at all. There'd just be a straight line. All right, and your sigma would be 0. All right, but the more spread out you are, the wider it is. So that's the principle. And this is something that was devised at Motorola years ago by an engineer who said, if we can tighten it up that much, if we can fit six sigmas between the upper and lower limits, we can actually achieve perfection to the tune of more of 99.99967%. And that is like 3 errors out of every 1,000,000 attempts. That's what we're after. If you do that, you almost eliminate error. And if you work at it carefully, that's what you can do.
And so if we were to understand this more completely, this is really, as our teachers used to tell us, that old bell curve and grading. That's exactly, and we want as narrow a curve as we can possibly get. Is that right?
That is exactly right. It's the bell curve, and you want it to look like a pimple. You just want a tall little curve, up, down. That's the best.
And if I understand this correctly, the mechanism allows us, by creating this pimple, if you will, to maximize quality and efficiency at the same time. Is that not the ultimate outcome that's desired?
The ultimate outcome of Six Sigma is to identify the factors that are widening your numbers. The whole idea of Six Sigma is that you approach everything systematically. Out of all the business processes, this is the one most data-driven. This is the one where you examine the data carefully and systematically, and you bring in all the tribal wisdom, and you say, these are the factors that matter. There are a lot of factors. We may be able to identify 140 factors, but only these 15 are at the top. These are the ones that matter, so you concentrate on them. And you systematically go through them, and you say, what is what we call the voice of the customer. That's the thing that makes that says where the limits are. Now, the voice of the business is the thing that makes the bell curve large. And you identify those factors and you say, okay, how can we improve this factor, that factor, that factor? And you come up with that, and then finally you come up with something that says, now, how are you going to make sure that it never goes back the way it was? The control. That's the essential technique. And that's what Cummins has been big on this for years, and it's saving us about $3 billion a year now.
Well, there's a number I can relate to, $3 billion, the B word, right?
The B word. And we're not alone. I mean, our CEO got wind of this back in the late 90s and became a great believer, and himself went through a project. He personally, and he sees all the officers do. And if you hope to advance in my company, you need to go through Six Sigma training and learn this. Now, that dismayed me at first because I'm not a numbers guy. I'm a word guy. But it can work. I found that out.
Now tell us a little bit about the pervasiveness of Six Sigma, especially in the corporate arena.
Six Sigma is one of many techniques that are used. We've all heard of them. There's lean. There's you can go all the way back to management by objective. It's almost like studying comparative religions, but they've all got this in common. They want you to be a better company, to reduce your costs and increase your profits. Well, this is, as I say, Six Sigma is the one that is most data driven. It is the one also that if you don't use it well, it's not going to do you any good. If you skip steps, if you leave stones unturned, if you say, oh, we know the answer to this and go on to it, you will fail. Six Sigma makes you put your nose down to the grindstone and say, no, we go through every single step, and oh, look what we found. I never knew that was important before, but now I understand. That's the driver. That's what Six Sigma does for you. And with every project, which is supervised by what we call, they borrow nomenclature from the martial arts. You have green belts and black belts and master black belts. Well, the master black belts have been through a lot of these things, and they can advise you, no, that's not the right technique, or that's right, but you'll need to do another thing over here. And if you follow their advice, you end up with a good solution.
Now, this Six Sigma is not something that someone just walks into, reads a book, and executes on. There's a coherent training program that goes with this, a way to earn your colored belts, so to speak.
Oh, there is. At Cummins, it's not an academic exercise. You actually have to come in with a project. And it's a 3-week training process, not contiguous weeks, but you're a week and then you got about 3 off and then another week and so forth. And you go through a lot. I mean, there was math I encountered here that I hadn't encountered before. For the engineers, this was a walk in the park, not for me. But you can get the idea of what's behind it, and you can always get help if you need it. And by the time you come out of that, you've got the tools that you need to work. But you're not a green belt until you have completed 3 projects. 3.
And what does it take to get succeeding belts?
Well, to become a black belt, at least in my company, basically you stop doing your job and you start doing only projects. And you do them for people in various departments. You're a black belt, and you do 5 to 7 projects a year. And that's all you do. And you do that for, I think, about 3 years. And then you're reintegrated back into the company.
It sounds like a really rigorous data-driven program. What you say you're a word guy, and this is data-driven. You've been involved in it for almost a year now. What's your take on it now?
It can work for we who work in words, and I didn't realize that before. But there are techniques, and when you're working on the communication side, as I am, it's not data in the same sense that the engineers have data. It's a series of organized observations. Anthropologists have been doing this for years. As a matter of fact, one of the main techniques we have was borrowed from a noted Japanese anthropologist, Jiro Kurokawa. And the technique he presented is known, reversing his initials, as the KJ. And basically, you take down all of the observations, sometimes hundreds of them, through interviews, which are carefully done with an observer, and you do surveys and you collect all the data you need, and then you organize that into what, for want of a better term, I'll call sound bites, no more than about 200 characters. And these are put on labels that are attached to sticky notes, and basically you gather your team and you put these up on a wall. And you say, okay, we're going to narrow these down to 30 that actually count. and you just silently take red dots and you vote for them. And you take down all those that don't have the dots, save them because you might do another project one day. And if they're more than 30, then they get a second dot, and you just keep going until you're down to the 30. Then you organize them. Say, and this is a gut feel thing. This is not logic. This is, what do I think goes with what else? How would I group these things? Is this observation a little bit like that? Yeah, because of this. Boom, and you put them together. And then you narrow that down, and you say, now, these and these, do these kind of have a common theme? Do they go together? And if so, they get a red label. Say, here is what it means in a single sentence. Here's how we group these. Then those with red labels, if possible, are grouped even higher, going up the ladder of abstraction. So in one exercise that we have in training, they show us a KJ that was done with regard to speakers, to home theater systems. And when you finally are finished with the process, you have one image statement at the top. And the image was, love the sound, hate the speakers. All right, that's what it all boiled down to. And there were a lot of observations between here and there, but that's what it came down to. So, oh, now that I have that understanding, now I know that if I can hide the speakers and get them out of sight, people are more likely to buy my system. All right, that is the kind of thing a KJ teaches you. And I'm working on a project right now where I've got a couple of those to do. An image KJ, which is what do people think of it? And then a requirements KJ, which means what's the way they think it ought to be.
Okay, then let's take a break there. Please join us in a few moments for our next session with Rob, where Rob will talk to us about how he's taken the principles of Six Sigma and applied it to a study, a project that involves public relations. This has been Explorations in Public Relations. I'm Bob Dittmer. Stay tuned for part 2 of our exploration of Six Sigma and public relations.